Hey guys, welcome back to Choco Yo. Today's episode is about a woman whose name appears exactly one time in the official history of Johnston County. One singular, solitary sentence. She doesn't even get a paragraph. She doesn't get a chapter. She gets a sentence and a list of firsts, tucked between a note about Reconstruction era office holders and a note about a 1969 town councilman. The sentence reads, "The first woman to hold elected office was Luma McLamb, Republican Register of Deeds from 1928 to 1932. One sentence, period. And yet, she won an election in a county so reliably Democratic that Republicans controlled county government for exactly 4 years out of the entire 20th century, and she was one of them. She won during Prohibition, in the county that had famously voted against Prohibition and earned itself the nickname Banner Whiskey County. She won in 1928, only 8 years after women got the right to vote, and 3 years before the bottom fell out of the American economy. And she held that office for a full term through the worst years of the Great Depression. One sentence. She deserves a whole lot more than that. Let's set the scene. 1928. The 19th Amendment had been ratified in 1920, granting women the right to vote, but North Carolina hadn't been one of the states to ratify it. Believe that or not. I mean, probably. North Carolina, as historian William Powell writes, in a meaningless action, finally ratified the right to vote for women in 1971. You have got to be kidding me. 51 years late, North Carolina finally says, well, maybe we can let them vote. Are you kidding me? Now, it was a moot process. I mean, it was a moot point by that time because it was already ratified. But North Carolina's like, nah, until 1971. So in 1928, when Luma McLamb was running for Register of Deeds in Johnston County, women had only been legally entitled to vote for 8 years in North Carolina. 8 years since a woman could walk into a polling place in Smithfield and cast a ballot, and now one of them was asking to be on the ballot. She was the first woman in North Carolina to try. In 1920, the very year women got the right to vote, a Buncombe County lawyer named Lillian Exum Clement had already gotten herself elected to the State House of Representatives. She was elected to the General Assembly of 1921's House of Representatives by an all-male electorate because the 19th Amendment had not yet been ratified when she won her primary. By an overwhelming margin, by the way, of 10,368 to 41. Darn. She was known as Brother Exum by her colleagues, introduced 17 bills in a single term, and then didn't run again. She died in 1925 at 30-something years old, having blazed a trail she never got to walk down twice. In the counties across the state, women were slowly, cautiously testing the waters of electoral politics throughout the 1920s. The most common entry point wasn't the legislature, it was county office. The first woman in Jackson County to run for public office entered the Democratic primary in 1924 as a candidate for Register of Deeds. Register of Deeds kept popping up across county after county as the office where women first tried their luck, and I guess that makes a certain practical sense in the time period. The Register of Deeds is not a glamorous office. Ask our current one, Craig Olive. It's a crucial office, though, the keeper of every deed, every mortgage, every marriage record, every birth certificate, every death certificate in the county is the living memory of property and family in legal form. But it wasn't the sheriff's department, wasn't the courthouse bench. It was the kind of office that required meticulous record keeping, steady administration, an eye for detail, exactly the skills that women had been told for generations were their particular gift. Kind of sexist, but if you were going to let a woman into county government, the argument was, let her keep the records. I mean, it was a back door, but it was a door. Luma McLamb walked right in it. Now, here's where Luma's story gets specifically interesting. because 1928 was not an ordinary election year. It was the strangest year in 20th century Southern politics up to that point. Members of the Democratic Party dominated Johnston County's local political landscape for most of the 20th century, although Republicans gained control of county government briefly in the years 1924 to 1926 and again during 28 to 30. That 28 to 30 window, that's Luma's window. Here's why it opened. The 1928 presidential election was unlike any the South had seen since Reconstruction. The Democratic nominee was Al Smith, governor of New York, Catholic, Irish-Italian immigrant son, and openly wet on prohibition. What that means, in case you don't know, was he's not really for prohibition. In a region where Baptist and Methodist churches formed the social backbone of nearly every county, where prohibition was a moral question as much as a political one, Al Smith was practically radioactive. Republican Herbert Hoover secured 54.7% of the vote in North Carolina, driven largely by anti-Catholic sentiment and opposition to Smith's wet stance on prohibition among the state's Protestant majority. Johnston County, the same Johnston County that had voted against prohibition in 1908 and earned the Banner Whiskey County title, went for Hoover, who is for prohibition, which is remarkable and tells you something about how powerful the anti-Catholic sentiment was. Ask the community in Meadow. They can tell you too. Even Banner Whiskey County, which had thumbed its nose at temperance for 27 years, could not bring itself to vote for a wet Catholic from New York City. The 1928 election was the only occasion between 1876 and 1964 in which North Carolina voted Republican at the presidential level. And riding that Republican wave into county government in as blue as they come county, in a blue as they come state, but it needs to also be said that Democratic Party and Republican Party then are not the same party now. They've definitely changed their tunes, but whatever. But the one that rode in on that Republican Party was Luma McLamb. She won because the tide came in behind her. That's honest. But she also had to be willing to run. And to run as a Republican in Johnston County in 28 took a specific kind of nerve. The party affiliation that gave her an opening also marked her as an outsider in a deeply tribal political culture. We wouldn't know anything about that in 2026, will we? When the wave receded in 1932, when Franklin Roosevelt swept the county on the back of the Depression and Johnston County went back to its Democratic roots, Luma McLamb's term ended and a man took the office back. 4 years. That's what the record gives her. Republican Register of Deeds from 28 to 32. Now, let's talk about what those 4 years actually were. In 28, the economy is still booming. The roaring 20s haven't roared their last yet. Cotton is struggling in Johnston County, but optimism is still alive in the brick storefronts and the new paved streets. In 29, October, stock market crashes, Great Depression begins. 30, banks start failing, farms start failing, cotton prices already low begin to collapse. 31, unemployment is climbing toward 25% nationally in rural counties like Johnston. The numbers are impossible to know precisely. Farmers don't show up in unemployment statistics. But the hardship is visible everywhere. 32, Roosevelt wins in a landslide. Johnston County goes back to the Democrats. Luma's term is done. She served as a Register of Deeds through all that. Through the crash, first 3 years of the Depression, she was the woman in the courthouse keeping all the records, recording the deeds when people sold off land they couldn't afford to keep. She was the one recording that. Recording the mortgages when the banks called in their notes. She's the one that recorded the marriages that kept happening despite everything, the births and the deaths that happened during the Great Depression. The Register of Deeds is where the human story of a county gets written in ink and filed in ledgers. During the Depression, that story was often a story of loss, and Luma McLamb was the one that wrote it. She was the voice of the Great Depression. She's the one that recorded everything. There is something worth sitting with here about what it meant to be a Republican woman in a Democratic county in 1928. The Republican Party of the South in that era was not what it is today. It was the party of Lincoln. Still, in the minds of white Southern Democrats, the party of Reconstruction, of federal interference, of Yankee imposition. Now, that sounds crazy in 2026, I'm sure, but consider that the American Civil War ended in 1865 and that Reconstruction and occupation of the South ended in 1877. This is 1920s. Y'all, it was only 50 years ago. To be a Republican in Johnston County was to be, in some sense, a dissenter, a person willing to stand outside the majority political culture and say, hey, I see things a little bit differently. And to be a woman candidate, and 28 on top of that, running 8 years after suffrage. Women hadn't even had the right to vote in a state that never even ratified the amendment. In a county that had never elected a woman to anything, was to be a dissenter twice over. We don't know what Luma McLamb said on the campaign trail. We don't know what the Herald wrote about her, although it's in those archives if someone wants to go looking. We don't know if she faced mockery or skepticism. I don't know. Or whether her neighbors were quietly proud of her. We don't know. I don't know if she had children or a husband who supported her. I think she did. Or whether she ran on her own terms entirely. I don't know. What we do know is that she won. And that she kept the office through 4 of the hardest years in American history. And when it was over, the county went back to the way that it had been. And 60 years passed before another woman, Eleanor Creech, in 1992, was elected to Johnston County's Board of County Commissioners. One first, then a 60-year gap. That is its own kind of story. Now, Register of Deeds is still an elected office in Johnston County. The North Carolina Constitution of 1868 provided for the election of a Register of Deeds, and since then it has been an elective office. The term of office is 4 years. The primary purpose of the office is to maintain records of real property, to enable the owner to give notice of ownership, and to produce and preserve satisfactory evidence of the transfer of an interest. Every deed Luma McLamb recorded is still in those files. Every marriage license she signed, every birth certificate, every death record in those 4 years. If your family has roots in Johnston County going back that far, there's a decent chance her signature is somewhere on your family's paper trail. She's in the record she kept, which is a fitting kind of immortality for a Register of Deeds. One sentence in the history books, but her name is written all over the county. And that's Luma McLamb of Benson. And y'all, that's Joko Yo. Until next time, y'all, be good.